Chapter 8 of Finding Gobi. Dion had to go home, but his wife said he could keep him, so he is waiting to get him back. So, Chapter 8. I've got some bad news. That was the first thing Lucia said when she greeted Dion at the Edinburgh airport. Not, I missed you, or I love you, or even, how was your flight? Those first two he already knew anyway and could just tell from her welcome home hug. Instead, she got straight to the point, and Dion knew, even before she continued, that she was talking about Gobi. It's not going to be easy, she explained as they walked toward the exit. You'd have thought that the hardest part of this whole thing would be getting Gobi out of China, but from what I can tell, it's getting her into Britain that's going to be tough. There's more red tape than you can imagine. Dion winced. He'd been afraid of this, but he wasn't ready to call it quits yet, and he could tell that his wife felt the same way. Tell me, he said as they stepped outside and started home. And she did. The biggest thing was the quarantine. According to British regulations, any animal entering the country had to be held in quarantine for 4 months before its owner could retrieve it. And to add to the problem, there was only one place in all of Britain where animals could be held. Heathrow, Lucia confirmed. Heathrow was Britain's largest airport, so that made sense. But it was right outside London, and they lived in Edinburgh, up in Scotland. That was 400 miles away. We'll figure it out, Dion declared. They had to. Gobi was counting on them. But once they got home and started doing more research, they found additional problems. In fact, the more they looked, the more it seemed that China might actually be tougher than Britain after all. In order to get Gobi out of China, she had to be seen by a vet and get official blood tests signed by a vet in whatever city she was flying out of. That meant getting her either to Beijing or Shanghai, because you couldn't take an animal out of any other city. But Beijing was 1,800 miles from Urumqi. That was 35 hours away by car, which meant Gobi would have to fly from Urumqi to Beijing first. And to do that, she had to get approval by a local vet and from someone in the Chinese government. But there was another hurdle. On the flight to Beijing, Gobi would have to be accompanied by whoever was planning to take her out of the country. It looked like Dion would have to go back to China after all. There wasn't much point in getting back until everything was settled, though, and that was going to be hard from all the way over in Scotland. Any chance of Nurali doing all that? Lucia asked one night. Dion snorted. She struggled to help me with my tent in the sandstorm, he replied. There's no way she'd do all that. Still, it wouldn't hurt to ask. They had been looking into using a pet moving service to make things easier, but most of the services wouldn't help them. It seemed flying pets in and out of China was so much trouble these companies didn't want to bother. Then they had a stroke of luck. A woman named Kiki said that her company, World Care Pet, might be able to help, but they would have to get Nurali to take care of the basic medical work in Urumqi first. Dion emailed Nurali and was surprised and pleased when she replied right away, especially since she said yes. She'll do it, he told Lucia happily. She says she'll take Gobi to the vet and get all her veterinary tests done, and she's going to buy a crate so Gobi can go on the plane. It was great news. Less great was when Kiki told them how much all of this would probably cost. $6,500, Dion wailed when he read her email. And probably another $2,000 for quarantine and traveling back and forth to check on her in London. That was almost $9,000 in all. And that was assuming they didn't run into any problems. It was a lot of money for one little dog. Dion didn't for a second consider stopping, though. Neither did Lucia. In a funny way, Gobi had already become part of their family. And family was more important than money any day of the week. They did think about how they were going to pay for all this, though. Both of them had decent jobs, but that didn't mean they had $9,000 to throw around. But Dion remembered his conversation with Richard and Mike and the others back in the desert. When he said he'd wanted to bring Gobi home, they had offered to chip in and help cover the costs. Now he mentioned that to Lucia. I've gotten a few emails from them since I got home, he said. They want to know how it's going with getting Gobi out here, and they've offered again to chip in. I think we should take them up on it. I think you're right, Lucia agreed. But maybe we need to do more than that. Maybe we need to see if anyone else wants to help too. She rested a hand on Dion's shoulder. Just hearing about you and Gobi from those other runners' blogs made me love her. I bet a lot of other people felt the same way. I think if we tell them what we're doing and why, we might get more of them wanting to help pay for all this. Dion considered that. He wasn't fond of asking anyone for money, or really asking for help in general, but this was important, and it wasn't about him and his pride. It was about Gobi and doing what was best for her. If people wanted to help, who was he to say no? Okay, he agreed. Let's do it. And that is the end of chapter 8. Go respond.